Welcome to Thriving as a Physician, the podcast that teaches you to thrive in your weight loss and life while juggling a packed physician's schedule, because you deserve to thrive. Each week, I share sustainable, enjoyable tools that work in your busy life so that you can reach all of your goals faster with more confidence. Everything in this podcast is backed by my experience as an obesity medicine physician, years of coaching physicians on weight loss and eating, and my own personal weight loss journey. Let's get thriving. This podcast contains general educational information on weight loss for physicians. I am not providing medical advice, and listening to this podcast does not create a physician-patient relationship. This podcast does not replace the need for consultation with a licensed professional, and no information should be relied upon unless you have obtained specific advice or treatment from myself or another physician. Please review the terms and conditions located at www.weightsolutionsforphysicians.ca before continuing. Welcome to episode 358 of the Thriving as a Physician podcast, How to Lose Weight and Love Your Life. I'm your host, Siobhan Key. I have a special episode for you today. I just finished doing a Q&A call with my Thrive Academy for Overeating members. And one of the questions I thought is such an important topic that I'm just sharing with you my response. And I thought that this would be helpful, number one, because this is something that almost everybody I've ever worked with struggles with. And also, I think I have a very different approach to how to do this better than how we've been taught in the past, as well as I think it's helpful for you to just kind of get a behind the scenes view of what sort of stuff do we talk about inside Thrive Academy for Overeating if you've been thinking and contemplating about joining. So the topic that we're going to talk about today is, how do you have the foods in your house without losing control, right? So if you're somebody and you're like, if I have X in my house, I can't stop. I eat it and it's totally gone. And that's the only way I can handle it. And you've gotten through by making sure you just don't have that food in your house. This episode is for you. I'm teaching you how to actually build the skill where you can have those foods in your house and you can actually sometimes even forget they're there. And I know for a lot of you, that's going to feel like you would never get there, like you're not sure if you could ever do it, but I promise you, you can. It's just we have to change how we're approaching these foods, how we approach this. And so often, if you've been working on managing your weight, if you've been working on changing your eating, most of the advice we get around these foods are just get it out of your environment. And I'll talk about in the recorded section, you'll hear me talk about how that isn't actually the best option because we can't always control when these foods show up. And I think it's way better to build the skill of how do I interact with this food, knowing that it's a food that will continue to show up in my life, and how do I interact with it in a way that feels good for me. That's what I'm going to teach you in this episode. Okay, so let's get going. Next question. If there's something I really love in the house, I can't just have a bit and leave the rest. I end up finishing it, almost like it won't be there tomorrow, even though I could just go buy more. Why do I do that? I think this is really common. And the question of like, how do you have stuff in the house and not be bothered by it? And like, maybe have a little bit, but not feel like you have to eat it all is a skill. And I think it's a skill that is really under taught because most kind of diet mentality, really any like weight loss type stuff you come across, a big piece of what they recommend usually is if there's food that's challenging for you, just keep it away from you. So keep it out of the house, ask other people not to bring it in the house, all that sort of stuff, right? Which is really kind of classic. The problem with that, and where I have issue with that, I think it can be helpful at the beginning, is to like lower the challenges for yourself. But if we're depending on just not having the food around as the main tool to feel in control around a food, the issue with that is sometimes that food's going to show up. And if the only skill you have and you've been depending on is, I can be in control around this food if I just don't have it around me, and then it shows up, what's going to happen is similar to what your question is you're not going to feel in control of it. You're going to probably end up eating all of it, overeating it, and maybe not feeling the best. Instead, I think we should work on the skill of, how do I live a life where this food is going to be around me? And again, we don't have control of all the food that shows up around us. We may be able to control what's in our house. And I say may because it'll depend on who else lives with us and how much they listen to our requests and stuff. But if you go to work, you might not have control over the food that shows up. If you go to social situations, if you go to a restaurant, if you hang out with friends, There's so many different things on where foods might just show up. So we need to also work on the skill of how do I interact with these foods and feel in control. And ideally, if we can work towards being able to be around these foods, have that little bit, not have to exert a ton of energy, and then move on. And if you've never experienced that with foods, that's okay. But it is definitely possible to do. To just share just kind of possibility with it is one of my biggest foods was chips. And I definitely was, if there was chips in the house, I ate them. They did not stay around. And now if there's often there's bags of chips around and I'll even forget, there's half open bags and I'll forget about them and they'll go stale because I've done this work of how do I interact with this food? So the food isn't controlling me anymore. It's my choice and I have the skill of interacting with it in the way that I want to. So when you're starting this, how do you do it? Right? Is the question. That's great, Siobhan, but how do you actually do it if you're starting from where this question is of you just can't have a bit and leave the rest. Number one of the biggest pieces of developing this skill is that empowered approach to eating that we talk about a lot of you're an adult, you're allowed to eat whatever you want. When you see a food and you're considering whether or not to have some, the most important piece that you start with is I could totally have that. And that's really important because it's immediately acknowledging that you absolutely could have it if you want it. Instead of what we would usually do is when we see these foods, we're like, okay, I shouldn't have that. And that doesn't sit well with us. It doesn't feel good in our brains to be told we can't have something. Often if there's something that is attractive and we get told we can't have it, it just makes us want it more, right? So starting with, that looks good and I could totally have some. And then you want to think down sort of two paths. And by telling yourself you could totally have it, it gives you space to do this thinking. If you say, I'm not allowed to have it, and imagine what it'd be like if I ate it, and imagine how good it'd be if I didn't. As soon as you say, I can't have that, your brain is not really going to give you the same space to consider your options. As soon as you tell that piece of your brain, yeah, you know what, it's okay, we could totally have it, it kind of calms down a little bit and gives you space to consider. And then you want to think, okay, if I do have it, what would that look like? And if I don't have it, what would that look like? What would both of those options look like immediately? What would they look like in 15 minutes, in a half hour, a few hours from now, tomorrow? And a question I think is really powerful is if I truly could have this food anytime I wanted, and you can, right? Meaning, and that question is developed carefully of when you're making these decisions. Another error we make is we think the decision we're making is a contract, meaning if I say no to the chips, that I'm not going to eat the chips, I'm saying no to chips for the foreseeable future because it might, in this setting, when we make this error in our brain, that's a bad food. We shouldn't be having it. So I'm saying no, and we're not going to eat it. Again, that doesn't sit well with our brains because it makes it higher stakes. It makes it so that your brain is more like, if I say no to this, if I'm committing to never having these again, but I like this. So do I really want to make that commitment, right? And so instead, when you say, if I could truly have this food anytime I want, that means if I were to say no now and I decided 5 minutes from now, actually, I do want some, I'm allowed to do that. I can do that. If I truly could have this food anytime I want, do I really want to have it now? Sorry, guys, I've got this dry cough that's driving me bananas these days. It brings it much lower stakes by saying it that way. It's acknowledging your control, your options in the food, and acknowledging the abundance. Often when we get out of control and we end up eating all the food, there's an element of scarcity to it. Hold on, I'm going to mute you guys so I can try and get rid of this. Hold on a sec. So often there's an element of scarcity, and scarcity drives overeating. So for some of this food, the scarcity might be, I shouldn't be having this. I'm not going to, if I'm going to eat it now, this is the last time I'm having it. I'm going to be really careful with it moving forward. That creates scarcity. That's going to make you want to overeat it. The other ways the scarcity can come up is it could be from childhood. If there's certain foods that other people in your family ate really quickly on you, and, if you didn't have it right away, it would be gone. That can create this sense of scarcity around these foods. even when you're an adult. But as much as possible, we want to work on abundance around these foods. And most of these foods are abundant. So if you think of most of the food that we struggle with when they're in the house, they're foods that we probably could access anytime we want. And I think especially in this current environment in the world, reminding yourself that these foods, like if I really wanted this food at midnight tonight, I can probably pick up my phone and have somebody deliver as much of that food as I want. So if I really wanted chips or fast food or something like that at any hour of the day, I don't even have to drive anymore to go get it. People will bring it to me in a relatively short period of time. And I think that's really important to remind ourselves of the abundance. These foods are abundant. They're everywhere. Generally, the foods that we struggle with aren't even the expensive foods. So it's not even, they're relatively cheap and not a financial limitation to accessing them for most people. So thinking about these foods in a truthful, abundant way of like, it's not special. It actually is available everywhere. I could have it multiple times a day if I chose to. I could have it all day long. I could stock my house with cases of it if I chose to, is really important. And I know if you've struggled with these foods, telling yourself that may feel a little bit risky. You're like, oh, if I had cases of it, then I'd really lose control. But you probably wouldn't, is the point I'm trying to make. If you had cases of these food in your house and it was no longer this special thing that you tried to limit, it loses a lot of its magic and its allure. A lot of the magic and allure for these foods is actually not coming from the true flavor and the true eating experience. It's coming from the idea of it. And a big piece of the allure and the magic of it is the idea of it's being something special and it's being something that's limited in your life. So when we take the empowered approach to eating and we start thinking of it as it's not limited, it's everywhere. I could have it everywhere. And this is another reason why I think building this skill where you can actually truly have it in your house is important, because it helps support this. It suddenly isn't very special anymore. Think about this. If you, like, a lot of people love chocolate cake, say, and it's special because we don't have it very often. But imagine if somebody said to you, okay, you know what? You are only able to have chocolate cake 3 meals a day. It's the only thing you can have. And you know what? Every couple of weeks, I'm going to let you have a salad. Think through that. How long do you think it would take until chocolate cake feels really boring and you don't even want it anymore? And it doesn't hold any attraction. And think too, how would salad start to feel? That salad that you don't get until like you can't have it for another week. And you have to be really careful you don't have too much of it. How does that salad start to feel, right? That's, I think, a really good brain exercise, because all of a sudden, even when I'm just saying it, in my brain, it's like chocolate cake, like, ugh, like it's everywhere. Like I've had so much chocolate cake. And in my brain, it's like, oh, a salad would be so nice, just by changing that parameter. And what that shows you is that the attraction to these foods is not inherent to the food itself. It's a large portion how we're talking about these foods, how we think about these foods, and how we interact with them. So to be able to have the food in your house, we have to change how we're interacting with it. So that's the first step. And as you do this work, it's not going to be perfect, right? There's going to be times where you overeat the food, and that's fine. And that's probably normal. Like when you think about what's normal, is it normal to occasionally overindulge in certain things? Yes. But what we want to work towards is not always overindulging, and letting it, when we do make that choice to overindulge, that it's a choice we made and we feel like we're in control. That's the big piece. We don't want to feel like the food is controlling us. So starting with that empowered approach to eating is really important. Working on that abundance. So even if if you have that sense of scarcity, like maybe from childhood, or maybe currently there's somebody in your house that eats the good stuff right away, reminding yourself you can get more. If you really want more, you can order more. You can hop in the car, drive not too far probably, and go get more. And so letting that abundance be there. If it's like a baked good that isn't, like, say it's a homemade thing, this comes up over holidays and stuff. One way to create that abundance where you can be like, you know what, I can always have more, is you take some and you freeze it. And you put it in the freezer, portioned out, and then in your brain, it's not like, this is the only time, like while this is fresh, it has to get eaten and then I don't get it again. You can be like, you know what? I can enjoy a bit now, but also I know that I've got a bunch like this stuff in the freezer, so I can have it anytime. And what I find in my own life is when I do that, often I forget about it in the freezer. Sometimes I don't even end up eating it, but the role of it probably isn't necessarily for me to eat it. It's just to feel abundant and to remove that scarcity from that food. Then when you do start eating this food, you really want to work on how you're thinking about it while you're eating it. So again, we can start eating and be thinking, oh, I shouldn't be doing this, and I need to make sure I don't overeat, and this is going to be the last time I eat it, and I'm not going to have any more tomorrow. All of that type thinking, which happens very commonly while you're eating, is scarcity, and it's going to drive more overeating. And so you want to continue this type of thinking even while you're eating. You can be like, yeah, this is good, and I could totally have more if I want, but also I could have more tonight, more tomorrow. I could have it at any time I want. That starts to make it easier to have like a little bit enjoy and then move on. The other piece that I think is really important when we're eating this type of food, and if you do the work we've been talking about where we've worked on your agency, I can totally eat this, I can absolutely have some of that. And the abundance, and there's plenty to go around, and there's no shortage of this food in my life. Then you start to have some space to notice the eating experience. So for a lot of these foods, the actual eating experience does not match up with our idea of the food. So you have this idea of how great this food would be and what it's like to eat it. And a lot of the time when we're eating it, we don't actually pay attention to what it's like to eat it. And so we end up eating it and we just don't pay attention. And the idea of the food starts to, it overshadows the actual experience of the food. So it feels like it was amazing because that's your idea of it. But if you actually give yourself permission that it's okay that you're eating it and that you don't have to rush because there's plenty of it around, you can start to notice the actual experience of it. And a lot of times the food does not taste as good as what we think it should, because our ideas of how it tastes may be based on what it was like when we were a kid or what its most ideal would be like. And lots of the times the version we get is not the ideal. And if you can start to just notice the taste, you may notice, you know what, this is okay, but it's not like amazing. And that makes it easier to, have a little bit and then be like, yeah, I'm good. I don't need any more. And you'll notice that way of speaking about the food, good, I don't need any more, is a calm, non-restrictive way. It's got a different energy from, I've had enough. I shouldn't have more. I've eaten my macros or my calories amount or whatever versions we say. You want to work towards where you're like, yeah, I'm good. That's good. I don't feel like I want any more. That's the type of vibe we want to work towards on this. The other piece about the eating experience is our brains actually down-regulate the flavor in the experience. So if you think about a super delicious thing that you've eaten, the first couple bites, mind-blowing, and you're like, oh, that's so good. Each additional bite starts to be less intense enjoyment. And it's how our brains work. If we're exposed to a repetitive stimuli, so tasting the same thing over and over again, we start to not taste it in the same way. And what we often do is, if it was really good at the beginning and then that enjoyment is starting to come down naturally, we try to eat more to try to get back to the taste it was. And we can't. So we keep eating more, trying to recapture that taste, and it just doesn't work that way. So having a big piece of something does not necessarily give you more pleasure and enjoyment from that food as having a smaller piece. But our minds think it should. And so we try. And if your goal is to this tastes so good and I want to enjoy it as much as possible, it might actually be more enjoyable. You may get more enjoyment from that food if you break it into different portions and you have it at different times so that you get those first couple bites and you can really enjoy it more times. So noticing what the actual experience is. And then the last piece I would say, when you're eating and if you feel like it's really hard to stop, you're doing all this stuff and you feel like you just can't stop, then I would look at that and consider, is there something else going on? Am I bothered about something? Am I stressed about something? Am I feeling anxious? Was it a long day? Am I tired? Because if you're doing all this stuff and you're thinking abundantly and you're just eating in a way that feels out of control to you, then usually what that means is there's something else that your brain's using that food for, and getting curious about, okay, what might that be? Because sometimes not being able to stop eating a particular food if it's in the house might be related to all the stuff we've been talking about. But other times it might just be that your brain thinks that food is doing something for you and addressing a need that you haven't met otherwise, like helping you feel less stressed, giving you a break after a long day, putting off doing more work, right? Like sometimes I think the ongoing eating, especially in the evening, is a little bit of like delay or procrastination from doing other work or chores or things we don't want to do. So being curious about that. The skill is a really big skill. But man, it's powerful. Like when you work on this and when you can have these foods around you and be like, yeah, you know what, I'm fine. I don't have to like exert energy to not eat these foods. I can just, be around them at times, enjoy them, but other times even forget that they're there. And I know for a lot of you listening, that seems totally out of the range of what you consider normal or maybe even possible right now. But it really is when you start changing how you're thinking about these foods, and building this skill gives you so much more peace around food, because you don't have to worry what other people are going to bring into your environment. You know what to do with it. And the food doesn't decide how you feel. You get to decide how you feel when you use these skills. All right. I hope that was helpful for you. I packed a lot of information into that answer. And so I really encourage you to maybe listen to it a couple times. This is not a skill that I would expect you to listen to this one episode and you're like, oh yeah, look, I'm fine with all these foods. I can have them in my house. This is something that needs practice. And this is something that you can easily get derailed on because of how deeply ingrained the thinking of, I can't have this, I'm not allowed to have it, it shouldn't be around, is in us. And so if this is something you struggle with, and if you're like, I really would like to be able to have X, Y, or Z in my house and not be bothered, just like my example I shared in this of chips in my house now, you need to listen to this episode multiple times. You need to give yourself grace, and you need to practice, and you need to be okay when you don't do it perfectly. When you feel like you mess up and you feel like you lost control with that food, that's okay. You just keep practicing. You keep moving towards that feeling of like, yeah, I just don't eat it. It's okay if it's here. It just doesn't bother me. That's what we're working towards. We're not trying to do this where the food's in your house and you're like hanging on like, I can't eat it. That is not the feeling we want. And that's probably the feeling you've had before. We're talking about totally overhauling this whole experience for you. If this is something you really struggle with, come join us inside Thrive Academy for Overeating. I've purposely made it easy for you to join. It's at a low monthly cost. It's easy for you to stay as long as you want. Come back if you need help down the road. It's meant to be really flexible for you. And this is the stuff we do. We take these challenges that you may have struggled with your entire life, and we learn how to build a skill so you don't ever have to struggle with it again. Once you learn this skill and you learn how to interact with these foods, you don't have to keep learning it. You just use it. And it's something you'll probably use for the rest of your life. That's the power of skill-based learning. And that's what I teach inside Thrive Academy for Overeating. So consider coming to join us. You can check it out at Start to Thrive. That's start number 2, thrive.ca. To learn more about the program, if you have any questions, send me an email, info@weightsolutions4physicians.ca. If you try this out and find it really helpful, send me an email. I love to hear it when people use stuff from the podcast and find it helpful. Again, info@weightsolutions4physicians.ca. And just a little note, because I didn't mention it, but Thrive Academy for Overeating is open to everybody. This is a program I created because I know more than physicians struggle with their eating. I know lots of you who listen to this podcast are not physicians, and you've asked me for years to have something where I can help you. This is your chance. That's what Thrive Academy for Overeating is. If you're a female physician and you want a smaller group setting that is physician only, and I think that's, quite common if you might not feel safe or able to talk about things openly in a bigger setting, then I still offer that too. That's my Thrive Fellowship, which is the physician-only version where you get access to all the Thrive Academy for Overeating stuff. Plus, we do weekly small group physician-only calls. And if you're interested in that, send me an email and I'll give you more information about it. All right, good luck. Here's to being able to have all the things in your house and feeling totally fine about it and enjoying it when you want to and not even thinking about it when you're not wanting to eat it. Have a fantastic day, guys. We'll talk to you later. Bye.